Hey, what's up? Welcome to Get an A in TOK. We're going to break down the November 22 TOK titles. First of all, though, you got to do this. If you look down at the link, if you look at the button up here, you can download a packet that's going to give you organizers. I'm going to help you out. Just go ahead and give me your email, plug it in. I'll send it to you. That will help you out so much. I'll give you 2 different great ways of doing this. Also, I've got some other videos, but also, the more important thing is, if you need some help, I've got a store on Fiverr just to get in contact with me. I will not write your essay for you, but if you want some help, if you want me to proofread it, I'll check it out. All right, let's figure this out. Let's go. Okay, let's look at prompt number 1. Prompt number 1 says, within an area of knowledge, is it more important to have credibility or power? This is cool. Discuss with reference to the natural sciences and one other area of knowledge. Okay, so most importantly, first of all, this is an either or question. I gotta get my cool pen out. I gotta get the magical pen. Yeah, this is either or. So answer it directly at the end while hinting to the outcome in your introduction. So the first thing I would say is you either completely answer this in your thesis, then say why you're right, or you preview your answer and then you give me the full answer in the conclusion. Remember, a conclusion that just wraps up, that summarizes, totally worthless. Okay, one of the things you might want to do here, I'll talk about natural sciences in a minute, but a lot of people are going to talk about the human sciences here. And according to the IB, the human sciences share a common focus of the study of human existence and behavior. So if you're really wanting to figure out what that second AOK is, and it's cool that you can choose, I really think that a lot of people will be doing human sciences because of these 2 things. We're talking about our existence, and we're talking about how people behave, and that just really seems to fit in here. So if you're trying to figure out that second AOK, check this one out. Okay, another tip is that you might, for one paragraph, you might explore credibility with no power. And then for another point, you might talk about power with no credibility. Now, you want to have more than 2 points, so I wouldn't make it just these 2 things. But this would be a cool angle to look at, for about a third of your paper. Okay, the next thing, you knew it was coming. Donald Trump, God's gift to TOK, and just about nothing else. Everyone is going to be tempted to connect this to politics, and that's good. But bring up Donald Trump. Bring up his tweets, bring up his quotes that were wrong or right. Yeah, that happened a couple times, I think. But don't stop there. Okay, don't think that you're cool or you're cute or you're really, sticking it to the man because you're talking about Donald Trump. That's cool, but go deeper than just Donald Trump said this and there was power, or Donald Trump said this and there was credibility. Go much deeper than just talking about a really controversial figure. Okay, one of the things that I like to talk about when I'm talking about both of the sciences is talking about the idea of publishing work. So some work is analyzed, I misspelled analyze. Some work is analyzed before it's published, and that's a really good thing. Other work is published before it's analyzed by other scientists, and that's not good. So how do those work? How does the idea of credibility work in the natural sciences? How does credibility work in the human sciences, and what do we look for when it comes to credibility? Dr. Scott Stripling, this just happened about the last week before I made this video. He just discovered a rock that may prove that the Hebrew language was used hundreds of years before previously thought. And this is a groundbreaking discovery, amazing. They say it's a generational find, but here's the thing. He didn't publish his work or get it checked. As soon as he found this rock, he went to a religious newspaper, a religious website, and didn't let other experts take a look at his findings first, which is super strange for any science. And so when I read that, I got really skeptical, and I think it'd be a cool thing. But why would a scientist go to a newspaper before a journal? That's an idea that connects with credibility, but you can talk about any idea of the publishing industry, like with academic journals, if you're talking about this prompt in either of the sciences, and probably math as well. And then also, if you want to talk about peer review, that's really important as well. It's huge in both of the sciences, and there's many things that we can talk about, and this connects with math as well. But basically, the idea that credibility in both of the sciences is really gained when other people agree with you. And then I would also say, thinking about paradigms, credibility is found when you agree with the world, when you agree with everything that everybody already believes, if you agree with the status quo. Even if you're right, if you disagree with the world, you don't really have that much credibility in the sciences. Okay, next thing. Discuss the power that every single AOK has, whatever you choose. So credibility needs to be defined as well. But what is the unique power? What is the kind of power found with people who are in your AOK? Do they have the power to change this, to affect that? Think about the experts, think about the knowledge authorities in your area of knowledge. What powers do they have? Credibility is going to be universal. Maybe not how we get that credibility, but credibility is credibility. But what does the power look like in the human sciences? What does power look like in the arts? And then if we're going to go into some common TOK terms, one of the best TOK terms and something that was a huge part of the redesign, which this is in the second year of, is the concept of authority. And that's because in today's world, people, in today's world, the concept is eroding. So authority, what does it even mean? Someone might be an authority, but that is causing people not to believe them. So think about what kind of things give power in each of your areas of knowledge. This could be a good point of comparison after your main body paragraphs. So who has power? But then how do you get power? In art, the way that you get power and the way that you get credibility is going to be completely different than how you get power in history or in the human sciences especially. So not just what is power and why it's important, but how do you get it? And then as we notice that this is an either or prompt, I would actually twist something up here and go for a twist that talks about knowledge that is credible and powerful. So within an area of knowledge, is it more important to have credibility and power? I might find a way to say they're not mutually exclusive and they don't have to be. So here is why credibility and power, is attainable, or here's why we should go for it. So there's always a good idea to explore multiple different ways of looking at the prompt, and I think that was really good. Now, before I move on to question number 2, what I would say is everything that I just talked about was giving you ideas about what to talk about with credibility and ideas to talk about with power, but you need to make sure that when you answer the prompt, when you choose this one, you are not just saying, here's what's credibility, here's what is power, that you are saying which is more important. And so if you take a point and counterpoint structure, which I highly suggest if you want to make higher than a D, is that at the end of every paragraph you say, so for example, in this paragraph proves that it's better to have credibility, or this piece of evidence proves that it is better to have power. So those are my thoughts on prompt number 1. Let's look at prompt number 2. Okay, I really want to draw. I'm going to not make my ideas blank and white. Let's just go with this. All right, title number 2. I really want to draw with my magical pen. If pushed too far, can open-mindedness itself become restrictive? Yes. Discuss with reference to 2 areas of knowledge. Okay, that's really important. They're choosing an IB word. We all love this. The IB defines open-mindedness as, I took this from the IB's guide, we critically appreciate our own cultures and personal histories, as well as the values and traditions of others. We seek and evaluate a range of points of view, and we are willing to grow from the experience. This, I would just say, this is your define the term section, okay? So sometimes it's good, not all the time, but sometimes it's good to have a little mini paragraph before your first body paragraph that defines the terms. And this, I would just say, this could actually work for an introduction as well. This would be a good way to say, here's what I mean by open-mindedness. But check this out. This is really important. Look at the verbs here. Critically appreciate, as a verb phrase, we seek, we evaluate, and we grow. Those could help you come up with some themes and potential knowledge questions. And if you download the help packet at getanANTOK.com/free stuff, you'll see my knowledge question organizer, and that is 3 main points. There are 3 knowledge questions or knowledge issues, knowledge statements, and you could just use these right there to come up with them. That'd be awesome. Okay, the next thing I would say, and you need to do this all the time, but the key word here really is restrictive. I would use the word restrictive a lot. I might use some synonyms as well, but yeah, just say restrictive, and don't get caught up by the theme and miss what the prompt is really asking. What is the prompt really asking? Can open-mindedness itself become restrictive? So what you could be tempted to do is talk a lot about open-mindedness and whether or not it's bad or good or harmful. But what it's really talking about is if open-mindedness restricts knowledge. That's how you're going to be able to explore the prompt the best. So for example, here's a couple of real-life situations. Pythagoras was open-minded to find new information in his OK maths, but he ended up creating a cult. I didn't know this. One of the students that sent me their essay on Fiverr, he came up with this. I'm like, oh man, this is great. So yeah, there's like a Pythagoras math cult. That's pretty crazy. That would be a great real-life situation. The key I go here for this, and I would, no matter what AOK you choose on this, I would do Karl Popper, even if it's in the introduction. But Karl Popper can connect to anything because it's just general philosophy. Karl Popper talks about the paradox of tolerance. And there's a great webcomic on it that explains it, but you can just Google it. And the idea between the idea with Karl Popper's paradox of tolerance is that if you want to have a tolerant society, so where everybody accepts everybody, you actually have to not accept people who don't accept people. So, and this is actually what he says, like a tolerant society cannot tolerate the intolerance. So you actually become intolerant yourself. But the idea is like if we tolerate Nazis, then eventually Nazis are going to take over the world and kill us. So we have to be intolerant of Nazis. That's what he says here. Here's something that just came up. I thought that this was really interesting. Is Caitlyn Jenner truly open-minded? Some people today are saying no. So what does this phrase mean today? What does open-minded mean? If we're going to be totally open-minded, do we have to be open-minded to the IB's definition of open-minded? So what happened with Caitlyn Jenner, a transgender male to female, hero, everyone's saying she's a hero, won all these awards and stuff, but now she's saying that the male who became a female, swimmer that won the NCAA championship should not be allowed to compete against other women. And so some people are saying Caitlyn Jenner is a bigot. Caitlyn Jenner is not open-minded, when just 2 years ago, Caitlyn Jenner was not a bigot and was completely open-minded. So when we have this open-minded idea, is it restricting us from other things? That's what this is asking, and that's prompt number 2. Let's look at prompt number 3. All right, prompt number 3, is it better to have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned? Adapted from Richard Feynman. Discuss with references to math and one other area of knowledge. So this is another either or question. So make sure that you hint at or preview your answer in your thesis, but then in the conclusion you fully develop it, one or the other, then develop the answer. Just have a direct answer. And I think that we'd all agree with having answers that can't be questions would be a bad thing. I mean, absolutely, right? But what you want to do is create counterpoints that discuss when unquestionable answers are good, beneficial, and helpful. So this is a yes or no question, so your organization is really given to you. So sometimes your evidence is going to point to yes, and then sometimes your evidence is going to point to no. So this one's really easy. You want some of your A-OK sometimes to say yes, and some today to say no. Now, go beyond that, but that's really going to help you figure it out. So I suggest using one of the sciences. There are great examples of people pursuing knowledge despite having questions that can't be answered. And then related to that, this prompt and quote assumes that there are questions that can't be answered. And I don't actually know if that's true. You might bring that up. This prompt assumes this, but is that even true? I might try to find something that's a time when somebody said something can't be answered, but it eventually was. Fermat's last theorem is like that, so there's a good RLS, real life situation. All right, let's go. And so, I mean, there are so many things like in technology that we say we will never know this, and then 100 years later we know that. So is it even possible to have an answer that can't be questioned? I'm sorry, to have a question that can't be answered? Okay, I'm not gonna do your research for you, but if you just Google things people thought were impossible but weren't, like half of your research is done right there. I'm not even gonna put it up here because it's so easy to find. So just check that out. One thing you can also talk about today, what is considered a question that can't be answered? Why can't it be answered? And then why is that better or worse than the alternative? History could be an easy A-OK to use here, as there are many questions that can never be answered in history because we lack the tools. For example, and I talked about this in my example TOK essay, but when we're talking about something that happened in history that's never going to happen again because of some weird situations, can we actually ever know really what caused that or really why that happened? So when it comes to the Great Depression, some people think that World War II ended the Great Depression. Some people think that that liberal financial plans ended the Great Depression. We will never know, and those people are free to argue for the rest of history. Math uses axioms, theorems, and reasoning and logic to know things. What are the unquestionable things in math? Axioms only work because we don't question things. So for example, looking down here, this is about to get really weird. If we question 2 plus 2, we are going to be ridiculed. If we say, I don't know if that's true. So does that restrict us or enable that? That might be a time when not questioning things is actually a good thing. And then finally, you can also explore ethics in each area of knowledge. What are the things that we're not allowed to question in those? And then ultimately what you're going to have to do is find examples when one is better than the other, and then synthesize all of that information to say, overall, I think this is better. Either questions that can't be answered or answers that can't be questions. Honestly, I think they're two totally different things, but you need to come up with some conclusion. And that reminds me, I read essays year-round. It's crazy. And even though you can probably say with this one, like, oh yeah, sometimes this and sometimes that, don't. There are so many times where conclusions are just wishy-washy and don't really take a stand. Take a stand and really just stand out to your examiner, because that will be more memorable. And just write with confidence. Even if you think, oh, I could be wrong, just say, answers that can't be questioned are better or worse, and this essay has explored it. Something like that. All right, let's move on to the next question. Title number 4, why do we seek indisputable evidence when it is so often unattainable? Great question. Discussed with reference to 2 areas of knowledge. So you get to choose here, that's cool. So there's another assumption, so often. I'm not sure if I would really explore that, but that would be an option. So this title assumes that there exists indisputable evidence. And so is that true? Is there anything that we cannot dispute? I'm not even sure if that's true, but it's saying that we are at least seeking that all the time. So what you want to do, and this would be a little mini paragraph after your intro, is define what indisputable means. And you are just saying, for the sake of this essay, indisputable is going to be defined as, and then you get to come up with it. You don't have to steal someone's definition, you can, but come up with your own that really fits your evidence and sets you up to succeed. One of the things I definitely explore when we're talking about, remember the key point is why we're looking for this, is what's the difference between something that's well justified, so something that, yeah, we agree, but then something that is indisputable. Those are 2 different things, and I would really explore that. You can also explore what makes something indisputable, but also, again, that's not what the prompt is asking. The prompt is asking, what is it about indisputable evidence that's so attractive? So, I'm not sure if I choose math for this, as we might claim that everything in math eventually becomes indisputable, but maybe that's a good reason to choose it. What is disputable in math? I'm not really sure. I think math is either really good for this one or really bad. I can't decide. I don't know. Just figure out the evidence. But Platonism and nominalism, they both come to mind as things that people argue about in math all of the time. And there is absolutely no indisputable nature of either one of those positions, whereas other things in math I would say are indisputable. So like going back to the earlier question, it's indisputable that 2 + 2 = 4. We can prove it in multiple ways. That is in the AOK of math. But then Platonism and nominalism, just look it up. There's no way for those to be indisputable. So there's 2 contrasting examples in the AOK of maths. Okay, next, both of the sciences seek knowledge and eventually want that knowledge to be indisputable. I almost always choose one of the sciences. It'd be really cool. So I would choose at least one of those. A great piece of evidence that is dealing with the human sciences is Many Labs 2, and the idea that psychology may be dead. So Many Labs, just really quickly, they replicated a whole bunch of psychological studies and found that they got completely different results than the old studies, and so we don't even know if we can replicate knowledge in psychology. And so the psychologists were looking for indisputable evidence based on the very important concept of replicability. So does an experiment give us the same results every time? And in the human sciences, they don't. So is there any sort of indisputable evidence in the sciences? Probably not. But then why do we replicate studies then, trying to get that indisputable evidence? That would be a great thing to explore. It'd be cool again to focus on ethics. What in there was subjective? What in there is indisputable? Is there anything in ethics that are indisputable? This is a great question. This is like my favorite question here for TOK. What counts as good evidence for a claim? So when we're talking about indisputable, how do we know when something is indisputable? How do we know that we get to what we want? And then finally, don't get off task. I could talk about this all day, so make sure that you stay on the prompt here. Prompt number 5, we're nearly done. To what extent do you agree with the directive to measure what is measurable and to make measurable what is not so? By Galileo. Answer with reference to the human sciences and one other area of knowledge. Okay, this one stumped me at first, and at first I was like, oh, that's the one I would just skip. I won't even record on that. I'll just tell everybody not to do it. But then I like it because it's a directive. So this is not just a quote like we have in question number 2 or 3, but this is Galileo telling us you are supposed to do this. So then we're saying, do you agree that you are supposed to do this? Not can you or should you, but he's saying you are supposed to do this. And then more importantly, because TOK, they don't care what you believe, they care about what the experts believe. So look at experts. Are experts doing this? Are they doing it because they agree with this directive? Now, what this claim is basically saying is that everything is measurable. Because if it's not measurable, then you're supposed to make it measurable. So is that even true? Some really good concepts, I would say, talk about economics. And the reason I would talk about economics in the human sciences is the concept of mathiness. So the idea that economics are more highly valued because they use numbers to communicate, and we equate numbers with certainty. Therefore, economics is more valuable. So that means we can measure economics. So therefore, that's good. Is that the case? I would then think about a human science that isn't absolutely measurable. Anthropology works. Is it bad because it's not measurable? I don't know. So if Galileo is saying we should try to make everything measurable, anthropology, which is how we learn a lot of things, isn't measurable. Does that mean that we should try to make it measurable? I don't think it was. I don't think it should. But what would happen if it was? What's interesting here is that the prompt quotes a natural scientist, but they require human sciences. I'm not sure if I would go anywhere with this. I just thought that was kind of interesting. And this would be a great one for art, because I think that we'd all agree that measuring art is bad. But at the same time, don't stay there. That's obvious. So one of the things you can think about is Rotten Tomatoes. They use numbers to say you should see this movie. And for some reason, if it's above 60%, they say it's fresh. That's measuring art. Is that good? Are we supposed to do that? Is that a directive? And Galileo is saying, great job, Rotten Tomatoes. And then letting other people tell us what valuable art is. Another thing, if you want to watch it, is the opening of Dead Poets Society. There's this funny opening of a textbook where they teach you how to use a chart to measure Shakespeare and to measure poems. Is that good? And then award shows. Award shows are using agreement to say this is valuable art and this is not valuable art. So again, that's a way of measuring art. So do you agree that this is what we were supposed to do? The Oscars were like a couple days ago, and they were totally stupid. Well, that Will Smith thing was nuts. Yeah, that was like more important than the Oscars. But are we supposed to measure art? How? Because Galileo is saying if there's something not measurable, which we all would agree is art, we're supposed to make it measurable. So we're supposed to measure it. I just don't know if I agree with that. And then finally, you can connect it to emotion, intuition, imagination. Does being measurable conflict with these TOK concepts? I would say yes. So are we then supposed to measure them? I don't know. Let's go to the last question. Title number 6. Here we go. If the artist has freedom, if the artist has freedom to interpret past events in ways that are denied to the historian, is this an asset or an obstacle to our understanding of the past? And please remember, we're not just talking about freedom of interpretation. We're talking about, this is really important, the understanding of the past. This phrase needs to be repeated a lot. So everything in this paper is actually dealing with understanding what happened, understanding past, understanding history. So it's not just interpretation and how much freedom artists have. It's that, but looking at it through the lens of understanding things that happened in the past. That makes it a little bit tricky. So absolutely, you have to. This is one of my favorite TOK pieces of evidence. You have to look at Footsoldier of Birmingham. Just Google it. It's a podcast. It will blow your mind. But this is dealing with art, showing something that happened in history, but it was exaggerated to make a point. It's awesome. You're welcome. Please just subscribe because I just made your paper so much better. All right, next. History is about studying the past. History is not what happened, okay? So that's something that people get messed up with a lot. If you just talk about something that happened in the past, that's not the AOK of history. Instead, how we learn about those things. That's the area of knowledge. So the easiest way to do that is to focus on the methods and tools that historians use that artists don't to gain their knowledge. Now, this title provides you with an easy organization. Have one set be the asset, have one section be the obstacle. So you might say, this half, this is my affirmative, and this is my disagreement section, okay? That's really easy. Just try to make it a little bit more complex than that, because if you just have two main sections, It's so clear, but sometimes examiners don't totally like that. Okay, next, it is vital that you understand that both historians and artists just make interpretations. Historians don't time travel. So as you think about it, how do they make these interpretations differently? And then going back to it, is that difference an asset or an obstacle? That's what you're answering. So this is a really thick, deep question. The prompt says if. That means that you might disagree completely and say that historians do have freedom to interpret past events in similar ways to artists. That would be a great way to critique everything. If you are shooting for a 10, find a creative way of talking about that. I've already said this, but repeat the phrase understanding of the past a bunch. Some art that interprets the past. I just came up with these off the top of my head. Washington crossing the Delaware. It's like American propaganda, but classic. Guernica, the Martin Luther King statue in Washington, D.C. Any biopic movie such as Lincoln or Ray, just any movie about a historical figure. Historical dramas like The Green Book and or Gladiator, they tell stories. But how do those stories affect our understanding of the past if they're fiction? Or if they're saying this is based on reality, but it's fiction. Herodotus, the first historian of all time, would be a great example for this. Virtually everything he says, we have to take with a grain of salt because he's totally biased and he's wanting his country to sound great. So basically, in understanding of the past, whose interpretation helps you more? That's what you got to answer. Okay, so if you haven't yet, after you subscribe, what you want to do is you want to go to getanaintok.com/free stuff. And then when you slack off and don't do any of this in like 4 months, what you want to do is get in touch with me on Fiverr. I'll help you out. I won't write your essay, but I'd love to get together. We can even Zoom. If you're still watching this, oh my gosh, you are a great student. That's it. I hope that TOK sucks a little bit less than it did a few minutes ago. Have a great day. I will see you next time.